Lieutenant General Baron von Steuben could not believe his eyes. At great risk and personal expense, he had traveled 4,000 miles across the Atlantic from Prussia to join the Continental Army. Arriving at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, in February 1778, he surveyed the desperate condition of this pathetic army with a mixture of alarm and disgust. He felt deceived. Under a gunmetal sky, he came on horseback from the town of York, 80 miles west, where Congress had fled after the British captured Philadelphia. After weeks of bitter cold, the weather had improved in late February, and the Schuylkill River had begun to melt. From a distance, Steuben could see 1,000 cabins crowding the hills. Smoke curled out of a forest of chimneys. As he approached, Steuben could not discern in the waning light the crimson tracks left by barefoot soldiers, but he could not miss the stinking carcasses of horses lying in the snow. General Washington met him on horseback outside the camp. The handsome, imposing Virginian and the plump Prussian with bulging lips and thick eyebrows rode side by side in awkward silence. Steuben, who was naturally ebullient, spoke French and German and very little English. Washington, who was characteristically reserved, spoke neither. It was an inauspicious beginning. Steuben soon realized that Washington's army was a chimera. The Continental Army was melting away faster than the snow. He had expected to join a force of 40,000 men, but fewer than 14,000 remained, and only half that were fit for duty. Nearly 7,000 were sick or not equipped to fight. Over the winter, nearly 2,500 men died from disease, and around 15,000 deserted, sneaking across enemy lines into Philadelphia 20 miles southeast along the Schuylkill. With regard to their military discipline, Steuben noted, "I may safely say that no such thing existed." The men had been left to perish by inches of cold and nakedness, Washington admitted. Without adequate food, the soldiers baked fire cakes made out of flour and water on a hot stone placed in the hearth. In some cases, starving men roasted their leather shoes to provide one more meal. One officer complained that Congress have let it in the power of the states to starve the army at pleasure. The camp needed 30,000 pounds of bread and an equivalent amount of meat daily. In addition, the men were promised a gill, 4 ounces, of whiskey a day. Rarely did the camp have anything approaching that amount. Angry soldiers chanted, "No bread, no soldiers." The local farmers refused to accept the nearly worthless Continental dollars. They preferred to sell food to the British soldiers for pounds sterling. The situation was so desperate that Washington told his troops to steal whatever food they could find and make an example out of farmers who sold to the British. The next day, Steuben surveyed the troops with his large wolfhound, Azor, sniffing alongside. Half-naked men with skeletal bodies stared back in wonder at his well-fed figure in a smart Prussian blue tunic bedecked with medals. The men were awed by the general. "Never before or since have I had such an impression of the ancient, fabled god of war," wrote one young private. Few soldiers owned more than one shirt, and many had none. More than 3,000 men were barefoot or partly naked. France had sent the army tens of thousands of boots that were too small for most Americans, and those that fit fell apart after marches across hundreds of miles. The scarcity of supplies forced many to cannibalize what little they had. The lucky few who had blankets cut them into tents. The ones with tents sewed the fabric into shirts. Most soldiers suffered from scabies or lice, which drove men to tear madly at their own flesh. As Steuben inspected the troops, men stood shivering with open sores covering their bodies. Medical care was almost non-existent. Thousands lay in camp hospitals without doctors, food, or drugs.